1, 2, 3, 4.
But we'll just say Charleston White became a master communicator, and that's respected in the literary world throughout Europe and the U.S. They respect literature, they respect communication, information, and one can speak. What would you say? One can speak fluidly. Fluid communication, as far as competently. That's a better word. But then there's a stylistic element why we have hip hop. Hip hop became that stylistic element of poetry. There was an expression, like you got dudes saying they made up. What you talking about? The Spanish genre is called reggaeton, and then it's another reggaeton, and they rhyming in Spanish, but really that's just rhyming in translation. It's still hip hop. It still came from who? United States, American descendants of slavery. Is rhyme, and we ain't talking about recently. That's been happening since the beginning of this country. But you can hear like later examples of the tape that everybody sees floating around, and it was maybe the 1930s or 40s when the gospel groups used to rhyme. So it's not something new. That's not, but because it's always, but so when people take our same genre, switch it to a different language, it's still what you took from us. It's still our stuff. It's all of it. And everybody around the world knows it. But because some people want to say, well, we ain't going to recognize them, they too good at that stuff. So they switch it and put the attention somewhere else. And this dude got a dress on. So that's another point why they let him in the game. You put the dress on. Cool. I see why they pushing you. And you light. Ain't a lot of melanin there. So that does, so they just let you go because if people take a low price and they'll go with the flow. We see what that is. But the point is that's all small. Don't have to address none of that. When Charleston White checked the people for genocide, as I said, when he checked, it was two people. Yes, it was the American Communist Party that was supporting this. This was the CRC was being supported. So it didn't get credence. And then it was like, wait a minute, man, this is an outside force of Russia and China in trying to support the were mainly Russian communist interests and European other communist interests trying to influence U.S. politics. That's how the paper called We Charge Genocide was seen. Could definitely be some merit to that. But the point is, as we move to to time when at least the W.E.B. Du Bois, so-called, respected, and he had his issues too. But the point is they were on that scale of thinking. So when Charleston White was confronted, the point is at least he knew enough history to say, wait a minute, it ain't just what you say. Now, of course, the U.S. has the most influence over the United Nations. It ain't got to listen to nothing they say ever. It ain't really a military body with any true power. But as far as being embarrassed in conversation, that's what happened when this was going on in the 1950s. So for Charleston White to say, hey, man, don't get me started with that. Don't bother me, because you know what it really is. We all know the history. If you want to talk internationally, if you want to dog me out in the country and don't nobody know about it, I'm going to just make my way I'm going to make my way. That's what he does. That's what we all do. We say, well, I'll figure it out. Nobody ran over to nowhere because they would be accused of running, the same way when people run from their country and came to the USA. Ain't that how they got here? They ran. They fled from dire situations. Ain't that what it's called? Ain't they seeking asylum somewhere? We ain't ran no goddamn where. If anything, we left from down south over to that racism to the up north racism up here. Why? There was a larger reason. There was a larger purpose. In racism, there was a bigger picture. Much deeper than what can be talked about in these general conversations online. The whole history of the world ain't gonna be on no free podcast nowhere. Don't count on it. Some jewels be dropped. Charleston White dropped jewels. He dropped some, didn't he? He gave that information and he gave that insight to make one remember. Yes, Malcolm X said he was going to go to the United Nations before he was assassinated. He said that. So everybody knows about that if they're familiar with Malcolm X. So the point is, go further Rewind, Charleston White pointed something out when he goes in the room with these super wealthy Caucasians. He's rolling with these influential figures now. They all got to recognize. They all like, yo, Charleston is smart. And it's no longer his race. See, he will rise. So dudes is arguing with him like that's the black dude, Charleston White. Nah, that ain't the same Charleston White, meaning he has expanded his horizons. He says it all the time. I'm meeting other people. You're going to meet people. You're going to meet first the gambling companies that's going to want to sponsor your show. That's going to be the first plateau you reach if you do a show on the podcast level, on social media. If you start something up, first it's going to be the gambling, because the athletes and the ball players, they got swallowed up by the gambling companies. The 4 major gambling companies, the corporations that come in and they say, we'll put your show up, we'll build a studio for you, and we'll support you. And there's going to be certain limits. Some dudes, them limits ain't going to help because they ain't saying nothing beyond them limits anyway. They just there to get a check. But Charleston White being independent at that point, at some point, people won't be independent. And if they get paid for whatever reason they have to get paid, that's what they had to do. It's just the problem is a lot of people keep conducting themselves as though they are true champions of free speech or true champions of justice. And that becomes a slogan that is corporately or privately sponsored. They don't say, oh, wait a minute, these people over here giving me money now, but I can't really switch up because they like the way I was doing that and I'm going to keep doing it. That's what we have as a people. We don't have a true meritocracy where people rise based on their own work. They get the position, they block others from saying anything, and they keep the position. Because I'll just say this before we get out. One time Al Sharpton dropped a bomb. He didn't say I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing to help the people. He said everyone has a voice now because of social media. Anyone can have a voice and say something. So he was smooth with it. He didn't say only listen to me and I'm going to lead you to the freedom level. He was saying, if you don't like what I'm saying or you don't agree or if what I'm saying ain't real enough, others can have a voice and they can express themselves and teach or whatever they do. It ain't just me. Because they come from traditional media when it was MS, where is he now? MSNBC and different channels like that is where he's known, and radio stations when his syndicated show was broadcast. So that was an era he came from. But he said there's another era, which is digital media. He acknowledged it. So he was saying, you can't hold me accountable for this game I'm running. You know I'm a preacher. You know I get on that pulpit and I spit that it. You know that's how I'm going to bring it. I'm going to rhyme. I'm going to talk. I'm going to preach. I'm going to move the crowd. As he said, that's what preaching do. And that's the oratory tradition that so-called black folk love. They love to get that one day a week back in the past, back in them 1900s where they heard that preaching and that signifying that you had them moving. And that one day of preaching on that Sunday had them motivated enough to get back up on Monday and go do it all over again. And that's what they did for us and they did for families. And we were carried on through that oral tradition because we had that day of celebration that we was still alive and we was here. That's what the preaching come from. So that's game he running. It's the preacher got game too. It's preacher game. So a lot of dudes get online. They kind of take from the preacher game and they on their hand, their own way like they ain't preaching, but they really preaching because they ain't really lead no direction. They just collection. They getting that pass plate around. They saying they calling it a different word. They calling it super chat. They taking those cash app. They taking that other one they call that other check thing they got, and they getting it, and they get it all kinds of ways. But what they supposed to do is drop jewels and give game and say, oh, this is what y'all do. So that's why we say Charleston White dropped the bomb the way he did. He dropped that knowledge when he said, America, I ain't your enemy. And he talked about the UN and the ear that the United Nations and the international community hears. If there was a so-called leader who actually said, wait a minute, quit harassing these black folk like that, man. Y'all doing this, y'all out of pocket. Nothing will be done, but the confrontation will be there. Just like the police brutality was addressed by the United Nations. And nobody never says nothing. The so-called leader of the so-called Negro, he says a little something, but not really. That was an international body that got hold to that topic and presented it and made a declaration and made a determination. But it ain't gonna never be followed up by none of these so-called Negroes in the U.S. Because they scared. And it ain't about that anyway. They don't even have no decisions how to do nothing. They don't know how to communicate on that level with Caucasians. Because at this point, as Charleston White pointed out, the U.S. ain't even what it was no more because they've let too many outside forces into the nation. That's the point. There was a time you couldn't even get in. You had to bring a skill, a trade, and they was letting unskilled, illegal people, it's tens of thousands of them. Everybody thought there was 5, 6 landscapers in the U.S. and that was illegal. That's all they thought. They didn't know there was tens of thousands of individuals in every city absorbing resources, jobs, changing the economy, changing inflation. They didn't even have an idea that these people didn't have to have no paperwork to be here, and people who've been here for years. And there's a reason for that. And it ain't just to put somebody down, because there's some other reasons and some other science about so-called black folk that go deeper into the history, go deeper than what can be explained just generally. It's a lot of complexities that involve being in this country. The point is, them other people ain't had nothing to say about that. They ain't had no answers, and they ain't just say, hey, all them people who just snuck in, get out. Get out. They ain't say that. Nah, man, well, they get this. What? Man, nothing. They ain't say nothing. So the point is, out of all of that, out of the overflow of individuals sucking up resources for those that was already in this country legally, what? Did that have to be explained? I mean, that was so, when Charleston White, he didn't go far there, and we ain't even arguing that because it'll just be a continuous headache. But the international viewpoint that he did address was powerful. So as we said, a little confusion from the presentation that was done in 1945 with the United Nations. First, it was the League of Nations, which became the United Nations, and then it was 1951, the We Charge Genocide presentation that was presented on multiple fronts, including the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So just for those few situations and individuals were addressed, that hadn't been done before in a way that we saw back then. So one more point, and finally, apologize for keeping on going, but this is another funny thing. The CRC emphasized that attempting to destroy a group in part was part of the definition, and argued that treatment of African Americans qualified as genocide. So what does that mean? They said if the General Assembly acts as the conscience of mankind and therefore acts favorably on our petition, it will have served the cause of peace. The CRC emphasized that attempting to destroy a group in part was part of the definition, and argued that treatment of African Americans qualified as genocide. We repeated that second part. We repeated what this presentation had done, and this was in the evidence. This was in the underlying meaning and message of what Charleston White was saying when he talked about the United Nations. If you go into the history and how they related to so-called American descendants of slavery. So that's why you ain't heard nothing else about Charleston White having no static. Because that's when the backroom meetings begin to happen. That's when he said, how did Charleston White say, oh, I got my channel back because Aiden Ross made a few calls to the people in the inner workings of YouTube. I got my, I think that was, he was saying he got his Instagram channel back from some inside calls that was made. So everybody knows it's a process of inside calls, but regular people don't get that. But when they recognize this dude ain't hateful, he just talking, man. He got conversation. He does back up his talk with action when it means to helping underserved, underprivileged, and unfortunate, and he helps them, and he has done that, and he's shown a history of that. He ain't just conning and trying to run and just go strictly get paper. He didn't have nothing for years when he was trying to help. So then he found a way to help himself, to help his own family, to help his children. And he motivated so nothing can be said. So that's why we said Charleston White. Have anybody ever heard that song? Remember that song by, what's his name? The MC that used to work with Kanye West. His name is Sci-Hi, the Prince, out of Atlanta, Georgia. And he had a mixtape. And I can't remember the name of it. And he had a song called Barry White. See, so the point is, he said, I'm about to Barry White. You know, it was a song. It was like he had metaphors and lyricism. When you think of Atlanta, they do have lyricism, not to be slept on. But as far as, he did bring that lyrical like message. So Charleston White brought that kind of message just the same, international. And it was subtle. He wasn't attacking nobody, but he was teaching. So, so as we said, the United Nations, and when Charleston White said that, all we saying is it jumped him up from a local conversation, which is considered national, so-called national politics, because he became a national problem, or an issue or a topic of the moment when he spoke on Charlie Kirk, and he elevated the game and mentioned something that was also an international action. Like, well, you might say that within your context, I'm the bad guy, but internationally, other nations and men among men know Charleston White ain't your problem, because they're on their way with ships, battleships, jet weaponry systems, meaning airplanes, bombers. They're around the world mobilizing for that on a daily basis at war. So me just talking to y'all, that's what Charleston White was letting them know. That ain't me. I ain't did nothing. I'm just talking. It's comedy. It's a characterization in a satirical way. And that was what opened the door for him. So, again, we apologize for an impromptu show. We didn't mean to go this far, but we wanted to just drop an extra show because people had listened to the other one. But we did want to emphasize the fact that, remember, go back and know Charleston White, what he did was emphasized United Nations actions that had occurred, and ain't nobody said nothing that we supposed to respect. We can't get mad. You can just chuckle and laugh and say, this dude is shook. These dudes are shook, then let them just be who they are. And we have now at least digital technology that allows us to express our own contribution to our people. This isn't an era where those people mobilize, them so-called leaders mobilize for us. You say, I'm going to start me a channel. I'm real good at fixing cars. I'm going to start doing an auto repair channel. And auto repair will never go out of style as long as there are automobiles. Straight up. So there's other issues, but what I'm saying is the number one thing, find what you're good at. If you have a skill, you can translate that skill on a digital platform. You can use it and you can teach. And if you teach and show people and help, it's going to benefit you one way or the other. The main benefit is helping others, but you will also be able to benefit yourself. I'm confident to say that this is online time fame, because online, it don't have to be the fame. It can just be the acclaim of progress that you've made in other people's lives. And that will reciprocate. That reciprocity will come back to you. You will get something for it. If you put something in the air and you help somebody, it's going to benefit you at the same time. You're going to get a benefit from helping others. And that's the problem where you don't see now in this era. We don't see that with people now because they just want all their acclaim for themselves. They want everything. They're greedy. They want all the money for themselves. And when people start doing something successful sometimes and they get some acclaim, their ego gets pushed to I'm better than them status. And we hear it in little symbols. Whenever you hear people say stuff like, well, God gave me this, or it's a God-given gift, they imply that other people don't have an equal gift. Maybe not in that same area, but everybody knows how to do something better than anybody else. They just have to find what that talent or ability is. They at least would be equal or better than one would expect. They know how to do something. That might be just being a team member. That might be an expert associate, an expert assistant. It may be anything. It doesn't not just have to be a leader. It might be something, but it's going to be something that makes impact. It's going to be something that makes a difference. So we don't hear people promoting that. We hear them saying, look at me, check this out. I'm going to do this. And they stand on that throne as though they're a king, and we pay them as we're a peasant. And they don't say, well, I made enough cash. Now let me start helping y'all. You don't even see that no more. It's just greed. You know why? People got generations of kids to take care of. Not only do they take care of their children, then you got your grandchildren. Then you need larger facilities. So don't never say nobody made enough money. They might have made enough money for you. But for them, they got other ideas of why they need even more. They ain't going to stop. So when Charleston White brought this knowledge, he brought this information, and he brought that conversation to the whole country. When he brought that conversation and said, hold on, wait a minute. When you're talking about Charleston White, I'm not your problem. African Americans ain't your problem. black people ain't your problem, America. It was almost like an automatic reset that he had to press. Like, let me reset the situation because y'all turning on me based on something in the past that was still propaganda. But we don't have that problem. Don't point at me like that, as though I'm some issue when you got all these other nations buying property, prime property and real estate in your country, placing their people who you don't know if they're spies or not, knowing where we taking spy information to that you wouldn't see in 20 minutes. Why would we want to take spy information and destroy a nation that we built that's ours as much as anybody who could purchase property? Why? Who is the foundation and the motivation, the heart and soul of the nation? That's the American descendants of slavery. And when we say that's a whole nother, see, even when you hear the soundbite, that's a whole nother story of who that really means and what that really is. Yes, it's those Asiatic people known as so-called black Americans. Yes, it's them. They go back generations to generation further than anybody else who calls themselves an American. Further back than that. Yes, it does that. Of course. Not with no anger, not with no hate, not with no resentment, because still genius enough to make a move, still smart enough and intelligent enough to pass that knowledge to their people so they can generate economics without hate. And that's what Charleston White was saying. That's why when we said long range comedy game of Charleston White, that's what it means. So it could be 13 people listening. It could be 13,000. We got to get busy. We got to make our own move. We got to be able to work ourselves into position the best we can with the platform that's supposed to represent the USA. Is it true and accurate as it's spoken? No, not at all. But we've been making it happen forever. And if one don't make it happen, you might get something from somebody else because you're closer to the goal. You're closer to the score. And if they help you get that, we all win. So that's not a way to look at it, as we accept a loss, but don't be afraid to help others. If somebody sitting right now that can make a move. One more story. I apologize for saying it and didn't stop, because we won't be able to, we try to do a show. We want to be able to do a show Monday through Friday and have a new upload. So this is almost bonus level. Well, we won't do it every week, but we will say that we one day we was on the street level, just waiting on some people and seeing people we might see, and we run into a young man at a music store, and he's selling CDs or something, DVDs. He got stuff printed up and pressed up, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm such and such," and the individual he said was a famous individual. I won't mention who it is, but very prominently known hip hop figure. I'm such and such's son. He didn't look like him from what I saw, but I didn't say nothing because you never know who is who. So I said, "Oh, all right." And we're talking, and we have a conversation. We out there by the store, in front of the record store. We just seeing who we see, and we moving around. Someone walked up and said, "Hey man, you seen such and such?" The individual that he's talking to, this young man that I'm standing by, the individual he mentioned let me know that he was telling the truth, because I knew from just reading the back of the CD who he was talking about. Oh yeah, you know him, so that you could see that the kid who he said he was, right there. He's talking and he's saying, "Yeah, my dad don't be helping me and stuff, and he be letting people get on his projects, and he don't let me on no projects. He putting random dudes on his record." And I said, "Yeah, so you're at the house when your dad is on tour?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "So you got access to the studio in the house?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why don't you make some music when your dad ain't home, and you use the studio, make some recordings, and show him that you can make your projects? And even if he don't want nothing to do with you, you do have access to a studio. You use that studio. You start making moves, and you put it down, and you show and prove." Man, the light bulb went off for the kid. You could see a light bulb light up in his head, and he went and got down. So I didn't benefit from that, but he was a good, humble, respectful brother. And I told him, "This is what you do. This is how it should be done." Bow. And he went and did that. I can remember hearing him on the radio with his dad. I called him after this happened. I had his number. "Hey man, what's going on?" Just recording and making moves. And I was happy for him. And what I'm saying is sometimes it ain't the individual in the immediate that's going to benefit. But if you see somebody else, and these ain't the kind of dudes that be in positions, the dudes who can help people and say, "Hey man, this how you do that. Go do that like this. Get this and you going to eat." You don't got them dudes no more. The dudes who are in these positions of power, in these corporations, in these companies, they're under the dude who owns the company, who is symbolically the slave master. That's symbolic. No disrespect. Then you got the house Negro, who's right up under him. And then you got the field Negro, meaning the outsider. So there are these metaphorical terms, but it still applies. And so while we're blaming the so-called master, Charlie, no, it's really this Negro that you right in front of that don't want nobody to get past him because he don't want to lose that house position. You might say, I'm going to get enough where I don't got to be nowhere near this plantation. I'm out. I'm going to go out into the woods, build me my own estate and do my thing. See, no, they don't want to do that. They want to stay straight. They want to stay close to that slave master. They don't want nobody else to prosper and benefit. And because they want to be the ones licking the boots every morning to that so-called slave master, symbolically speaking. So that's what they do. So this is where the era we're at right now. That's why ain't nothing growing. The music all sound the same. Everybody's a player. You know, if you come to the Charleston White level of game, he would call that a player hater. It's a bunch of player haters and it's a very few players. So the player ain't the one who's supposed to be using. The player's supposed to make it shake. That's why you used to always hear people say he's a power player. You the power player meaning you making it happen. You giving people opportunity. These dudes just want to be praised for somebody who's live and like they some boss dude. They ain't boss. They boss under the boss. They ain't no underboss. They the under dude. They the underdog. They ain't no boss in no kind of way. They ain't no underboss or none of that. They Negroes. So when you look at the history of that Negro who stops others, he's a traitor. It's bigger than that. He no powerful individual, and he don't know he's a traitor because he thinks he's doing good. So it would be a derogatory term if we called him that as a name and he wasn't that. It was something that he don't even know what he is because he don't have true knowledge of himself. He don't even know who he is. You thinking, why this dude dogging me out? The dude don't even know himself. How he dogging you out when he don't even know who he is? He's lost. He's lost in the sauce and he don't even know. But he done got a few dollars. He got a couple of cars and some jewelry. And to him, you look at his house and let's say he got a 10,000 square feet house. To him, it's 1,000,000 square feet because his mind is so small. He thinks he's bigger than he is. And that's the term they used to call people when they used to say they were Negro rich. Amongst the so-called Negro, he's balling. So you're supposed to look up to him like he's the boss of the boss that he has. See, but he ain't. He knows who he is when the other boss works in the room. But when he sees us, because we have the same skin tone, he wants more respect than he really is able to get. That's why when we see the phenomenon, the maker, the one, the new, that's when we see Charleston White, the new door opener, the new brother who said, y'all go ahead and, do them reactionary videos. He said he told his whole crew, do reactionary videos, and they didn't want to do it. I don't see that. And now guess what? They doing it now because they see people prospering when they had that word Charleston White. And if they saying something that makes some sense, see, now it got to be something that makes some sense to help people as well. It can't just be, I'm going to use his name, get over it, I'm going to get on. Nah, it got to be some game. Game is universal, international, street to street, coast to coast. Who can do it the most? That's game. These dudes don't say no game. They under contract not to talk about what is going on. And they come to us like they are a friend. Yeah, everybody. Yeah, let me give y'all some information. They got this new liquor out and y'all can go get that. And our sponsors is also this number and that. And they just telling us to buy something that a sucker would buy. No real game. No real progress, just some game that was being ran on to those who don't know. It's fair to run game for those that know game. So if you know game, that don't even affect you. I ain't mad at you. You just doing what you got to do. Ain't that what Pac said? I ain't mad at you. Ain't that what it is? We ain't mad. He's saying it in a sarcastic way because he's really like, I'm disappointed in you, but I ain't mad at you because you don't know no better. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Ain't that what they say in that Christian book, in that Christian Bible? That's what they are. So they player haters. They done gave a broad more paper than they done gave their best friend. You know what I'm saying? In secret. She run their whole empire and they talking about you knew this brother longer than he knew himself. And he done got ran off on with some broad and she's baby mama number 4. And you can't get a dime for him to help the whole neighborhood and all the kids. He won't even sponsor a football team the correct way. Yeah, he didn't buy some shirts in the football, but he don't have long range game. That's the point. Whatever you see materially doesn't extend intellectually, intelligently, and it's applied knowledge. They don't have that. People are good at what they're good at to have gotten in the position they got to, but that don't make them high level smart dudes. So again, you're listening to Online Time Fame Podcast. So We apologize for extending this show a little bit. We do want to extend a promise that we will do our best to keep making episodes, because the episodes is going to continue the best we can, because that's a duty we can give to the people. Get them some information, share some information. We read it from somewhere, and if we read it from somewhere, all we did was share it with you. We may put our take on something here and there, but we want to share the information. Yes, we do come up with ideas, but if we give out something in its basic level, we ain't claiming that it's the most genius, groundbreaking knowledge, because it's something that you can read. We need you to confirm what we say, and you've read it and you can further it. So apologize for when we come impromptu and we say something that's not, we didn't just research it as well as we would, but we want to give you the information. You can go read that one topic and say, yeah, I got it. And then you're gone. You go through the roof with it. So that's the objective of what we got, because that's what we see from who? Charleston White. He gives us these shows. He drops this information, and it's motivation. He said, get you a show. Start doing this. Whatever is your interest, digitize it, and then bring it to the real world. That's what we got from Charleston White, right? We all knew, but when we saw him do it, he took it to an international level. That's what hadn't been done in this country for 60 years. Back international. We hear the brothers say they're international, but it has to be in practice. It has to be shown. It has to be known. Yeah, I'm here, but we have global communication online. That's the difference. This is global communication. People can access your information, your social media, your email. They can contact you. They see what you're doing around the world. Except for those few countries that have blocked access and they have extreme censorship, people can get information in ways they never could before. So by default, that makes the USA, because they do have a certain degree of so-called free speech, it makes us international. So when Charleston White pointed out the international and the history of international communication within the USA, that's what changed the whole game, because nobody hadn't acted on it. Them dudes who are in position, they getting paper. They ain't got to make no difference. They ain't got to make nothing improve and make nothing pop for the everyday people, because they not at the street level with the everyday dudes no more. They ain't around where we at. They drive through. They got their men's in them to come through. They got their people. Hey, what's going on? We work with dude. But as far as a difference and a change and some implementation of something that improves our lives, they ain't got that. They ain't got that level. That's a real player. That's why you can see they not players. They just bullies. It's a bunch of bullies, and it's a bunch of strong-arm dudes who strong-arm their own people. That's why when Charleston White said, hold on, wait a minute, y'all just shooting people in the community. Y'all gangbangers is weak. That's why they didn't do nothing to him. Because all they would do is prove him right by bothering him. Now, he ain't put himself in a position to be abused, because there's always a fool waiting to be used. So they didn't just step to him and could have made and inflicted bodily harm on him. Nah, they ain't do that. They fell back. They said, you know what? Let him ride with that. We ain't going to say nothing. We ain't going to do nothing. And that's what happened. But they all knew he was right. Charleston White was right, putting us on the spot that we don't be doing the right thing. We attack our own people, we kill our own people, and then we come online and want credit for what we do to so-called black people. That was hypocrisy at its highest. They felt it in their soul. We have to give them credit because they were embarrassed and they knew deep down what he was saying was right. You can see it in them that they've changed. There's a gangbanger, street dude from the 90s era. And as we say, I don't want to talk about individuals at all. Not, in a sense, because we want to go higher than that. We don't want to focus on them because we got this long range game. This long range game right here. This long range game, when you used to go to the street level, you're on the street level, you're in the club, you ain't acknowledged them peons. A lot of these dudes be outside and couldn't even get in. And when they got in, they wasn't around the real players. They wasn't around the big money dudes. They might be muscle. They might be sent somewhere to do something to somebody. But that wasn't nobody you was really around on a regular basis, because they was like a live wire firecracker. That wasn't nothing cool. They wasn't smooth. They wasn't with the bras. They wasn't getting the paper. They wasn't floating in the fly whips. They became the player hater who wanted to stop the real player. That's what became the majority. The majority became haters and suckers suckers and marks. They wanted you to be the mark, but really they was the loser within themselves. They was the mark in the dark because they couldn't see the light to get that paper to make it right. They couldn't even stand on the street corner and really be fly. They came on like digital media, and they came when it was still traditional media, and they was on DVDs, and they was on these cable TV shows talking about being players. But the real players was laying back in the cut watching these dudes saying, man, what is this? These dudes is marks. And when they saw him face to face, they told him that was some sucker move you did when you jumped on HBO. They told him that. Trust that. They told him you was a sucker for saying who I am on these airwaves, because them live dudes ain't been shown. Everybody that heard about a real dude who came home and they don't be heard saying nothing. You know that. But anyway, street dude. He was talking about how he rolled up on somebody and he was getting ready to exact punishment. He was getting ready to apply. He was about to apply punishment. He was about to enforce punishment. He was about to use punishment against this individual. Physical. He was about to use force, enforce brutal, deadly force on this individual. And he said the dude reached on the dashboard, grabbed the Bible and said, nah, man, I'm in church now. Nah, I'm not rolling like that. I'm not banging. And the brother said, oh, man, he looked at him. He saw he had the Bible and he wasn't in the street, and he gave the dude a pass. So for that reason, you know, I would always give respect to these people that didn't hurt people who didn't need to be hurt. This dude asked for a second chance, and this is a gangbanger, known killers throughout the 90s that backed off and didn't do nothing to this dude based on principle. Showed him mercy. Said, you know what? I'm gonna recognize that, because he saw the dude with the Bible. The dude begged for his life. I'm not in that no more. I'm in church. And he let the dude get a pass. So that individual that I'm speaking on, that, you know, we all watch interviews in the digital platforms. People may have seen it, and we ain't here to co-sign who it was, because we ain't trying to say no names like that. Not just because of conflict, but that's part of the game. That street game. That was a street game conversation that he even shared. So he wasn't really even supposed to share that, because that streets is streets. The streets is the streets.
The street is the street.
Always. Street is supposed to be the street. So that we ain't even try to propagate that. But the story was so important and relevant, and we see individuals that are getting some benefits of just digital media, and they are. Some of them deserve something because they doing what they can do with the best they can work with. So we ain't here condemning and saying nothing about none of them in an intentional way, but just in a conversational way, in a comparative way, we may say, well, man, an individual ain't supposed to be rolling on their own people. And that's what Charleston White was bringing to people. Y'all ain't supposed to be coming against y'all own people. They couldn't say nothing to him. That was the rise of Charleston White, when he put it on the spot. Man, y'all riding on your own people. That's weak. He said, when I kill somebody, I killed a white man. Ain't that what Charleston White said? Now, that's a characterization, and he's using his character, but he's, saying that was a white man. We used to ride white folk. He pointed that out. That's how it used to be. But he still apologized and backed up off it. But that was just to compare. Y'all think robbing y'all own people is supposed to get respect. Robbing anyone is wrong. Robbing any individual or taking anyone's life is wrong. So when he pointed that out, of course we knew that. We knew that was his character talking. But when we see some of our most prominent people and they embraced gang culture and gang banging, and then they die by the way of the sword, we knew they was in a bad position. We knew they was in the wrong area of content. We knew it. Some of them didn't know what it would be, and that's what it became, because they didn't know. You in the jungle. You in the jungle amongst unconscious Asiatics who will take your life before that so-called Caucasian will. And that's the real truth that's never spoken. So when Charleston White presented that to the people, they didn't want to do nothing to him. He was in the room with these people. He was right with them. But they couldn't justify their presence and come in the media world and on a media platform and justify their behavior. You got dudes who want to come out of the penitentiary. You in the street, stay in the street. You're supposed to keep the conversations that happen in the street. But they coming on like they coming out of the penitentiary like Nelson Mandela, like 20 years later, and they talking and without really addressing the fact that, yeah, we know you was wrong and you did what you sold and you sold what you did. And that's what it is, because the street is the street. We get that. But you don't get to come on these digital platforms without being a bully, because you're going to have to threaten somebody and tell them that they can't confront you about the truth, about the hypocrisy that you demonstrate, about the nature of how you move. You would rather sell crack to your own people before you would go to McDonald's and get a job like everybody else did, who knew you was going to jail before you went. We knew y'all going to jail. And we didn't know because we were smart. We knew because them players had told us they all going to the penitentiary. If I was you, I'd stay away from them dudes. And this is my mans in them. Nah, they going to jail. Stay away from them. The way they moving is out of order. They ain't even listening to us. That's what the story was. For those of us who was fortunate enough to get the story, don't touch that stuff. Don't touch nothing illegal. Stay away. It's a trap. It's a trap. It's not what it looks like. So peace to all them people who put us on game. So that's why we say we come here with game. Ain't nobody claiming. These dudes claiming they had the most drugs. Man, that ain't even no conversation that's supposed to be had. If it was some conversation that was supposed to be had, it would be check with your local community college on any talent you may have, and you can get a trade, and you may be able to take that trade. You may be able to take that trade. You may be able to take that trade within 4 semesters. Have a certificate where you may be a refrigeration and heating specialist. Now, it may take an internship or apprenticeship after the completion of that certificate program, depending on how much time you have for the moment and how much you can invest. And you may be able to get a 4-semester certificate or an associate degree, which would be equivalent to like 60 credits, where you could get a skill that you can have a career. Like, my point is, if it's going to be any conversation, it's going to be that kind of conversation. And that's the conversation that them dudes ain't got, because they ain't never been that route. See, that ain't the fancy route. That's the long run. That's the marathon. That don't come like the sprint. The sprint is when you go to the club on Saturday and you see that dude balling and he got all the champagne and he popping, and we step back and we give him his respect. You doing it, but we know, we hope it lasts forever, but usually it don't. So ain't no player hating. We glad to see him winning, because we right there around him and we can be there because we can be in the street. But the point is, as these individuals have come home and they get online and they bickering and they talking about another individual about who is bad and who is good, it ain't about none of that, because Charleston White already showed what the big picture was internationally, and people didn't educate themselves on an international scale. And then what would they say? We evaluate somebody by the works that they've done. So if I know I was selling crack to the hood and I was getting money, would I just run and jump online? Nah, I'd be quiet. Because I can be checked for what I did. Oh, I was wrong and I wasn't supposed to do that. We know that already. You ain't got to apologize. But didn't you take any courses in the penitentiary? You ain't go to school? I mean, not even to say that. But what we're saying is we're in an era where the people who do all the talking are welcome, because really they telling. They bringing up old stuff and old crimes and saying it online, which is opening up who you think is listening. Law enforcement. Law enforcement is the number one listener online, listening to all their stories. So they went from a criminal to an informant and they don't even know it. This is the game levels that they don't even have, because you've been locked up. You don't even know what this digital platform stuff is. You think it's just free talking. You think you could just say something and you going back and forth like a teenager, bickering and calling somebody names and calling somebody an informant and going back and forth. And that's an embarrassment to the people. So that's what you can't get from the dudes who ain't really from the street, because they can't chastise and speak on no real conversation. Now, you can't speak on nobody else's business, but when we talking about global thought, global intellect, global knowledge, and we talking about, I guess they would call it a think tank, what they have like the intellectual think tanks or the academians, I think it is, the academians or the academics and the intellects. Let's just say like that intellectual class. Let's just say it like that. But they not that. You got dudes like that in the penitentiary. They told them what not to do, but they come out here and say, hey, well, I ain't around them penitentiary dudes no more. I'm gonna get out in these streets because these dudes is, I got to get what I got to get. UPS is hiring. McDonald's is right there. Go check in. Nah, I can't do that. If you sold crack, you can't work at McDonald's. It's the same thing. Meaning, you have to swallow your pride to go do it. You didn't have to swallow your pride to sell that crack. You didn't have to know, man, I'm dead wrong. I'm selling this drug. I need this paper. My mama's on drugs. I need some bread. We get it. Go do it. Do what you got to do. You did it. Whatever you did, whatever you do, we see it. We ain't no judge. There's one judge. And that's the universe. The universe will judge your actions. But when they come out here, they're behind a little bit. They've been in the penitentiary. They don't know what's going on. They desperate. I'm going to use my name and I'm able to be around these dudes who could never be around no live dude. So now I got this rapper who want to be around me, but he wasn't around me when I was getting paid because he was a nobody. You wasn't nobody. You rap. You rap. You ain't never been a live dude because the realest live dude don't want no rapper nowhere around them. Man, who is this? A mark? What is rap? What is that? And that's when once people started making a certain economic level and they saw it was money in it, they said, oh, all right, yeah, they rap. And then, but the real dudes would be like, man, that nigga rapping about me. And they had a problem with each other because dudes would say, he rapping my life. Well, he's rapping his life and he's a storyteller and he is rhyming certain elements of your life and what he sees, but don't hate. Let him rhyme. But my point is, when dudes start to believe they are what they not. Great example. Ice-T. From the long-running show Law and Order, the MC, the award-winning entertainer. He has always said he never portrayed himself as something he was not in the street, because real people would say, why is Ice-T representing himself like that? And he wasn't that. If you notice, Ice-T never had no problems, because he acknowledged with the streets for what they were. A lot of people, it's not that they tried to cause a problem. They just didn't know how to navigate and they was at the wrong place in the wrong time. It could happen to anyone. But there was a certain fine line that Ice-T knew how to travel throughout his career, meaning in the streets and in entertainment. He was always good at that. So my point is, a lot of people are coming right now. They want to be in entertainment. They want to bump shoulders. They want to get into stuff, but they don't know the game because the game they was in is a game that didn't stand the test of time. Selling crack in your community projects don't make you a real player. That was just something that was going on at the time. That was an easy hustle and you got jammed up in it and you come home so you don't get super level crack. That wasn't even powder. You had rocks for somebody's auntie. You was taking advantage and taking household food out of people's stomach because you was just there and you was muscling as though that was long range game. No, that was local. That wasn't long range. You had 3 projects on lock. Come on, bruh. For real? So we ain't talking about it like that. What we're saying is the streets see this. The streets see what you was doing. All the real dudes from back then who some have passed and gone. They knew that was sucker money. When it was happening, they knew you was going to end up broke when you came home. They knew it before you did it because they educated everybody. Stay away from them clowns. They ain't going to have no paper. So dudes do a lot of talking. Who wants to know about all that? All that, it's about what's happening on these streets and what's happening with these shorties. What's happening with these kids, how we going to get them elevated, and what's happening with these women. See, a dude told me one time, he said, hey man, these new dudes, this is what they say all the time. My mans is in them. My mans is in them. My dudes is in them. We've heard this said before. Back in the old days, what dudes used to say? My woman, my female, my ladies, my broads, my, different words they would use. So the switch came when dudes stopped focusing on women and it was all about a bunch of dudes. And we're not saying dudes wasn't around, but dudes didn't have to announce what was already known. But these dudes became the focus of dudes because their game was not long range. That's all they could do was focus on a bunch of dudes. Big house with a bunch of dudes in it. And that's how they was getting their paper. That ain't an issue because organizations were of men. We get that. But these organizations that these had was short range. That's why they got popped. They got locked down easy. They got caught. So we ain't going to give up the game because that ain't the game to tell the game. See, but when Charleston White hit us with some game, he hit us with a little bit, not with the whole. One had to go do their research and learn the rest. That's all that had to be done. And that's what he did. So when he talked about long range and he talked about the United Nations, soon as he said the United Nations, bing, a whole nother light went off on people's head, or it should have. And they should have said, what is he talking about? What does he mean internationally? What is he talking about globally? What is he talking about? And he said that talking to a certain demographic of people who were in power, because people in power were questioning him. So what he said was, if you're questioning me, America, and that don't mean the dude down at the grocery store and the everyday people. It meant people who were conscious and politically active, politically aware. As voters or legislators, who are you talking to? That's what he was saying. Me and you ain't got no problem, America. But if you're confronting me about a problem, if black people wanted to confront you equally, they would go to the seat at the United Nations that is open to them, and the international community will welcome you with open arms. And he gave an example. And my point is, but no leader that you see, no speaker from any organization that we know, they don't even talk to the streets. They don't talk to us. If they do, they're going to go get a thought. They're going to get an ignorant woman, what they would call, whatever derogatory term she would be, and she, ignorant. Let's start with that. That's good enough. That's who they talk to. But they don't talk to no intelligent people. Charleston White said this. It's a common sense fact. Who did we see traveling around promoting political parties? Who was speaking for them in the so-called black community? It wasn't nobody with no education. It wasn't nobody with no high school. It wasn't nobody with a high school diploma. They went and got people with limited credits, with a college degree that wasn't engineering. It wasn't economics. It wasn't a finance degree. It wasn't nothing of relevance. It was just someone who didn't even have knowledge, and they wanted to talk to them and dumb down the people. And what did they do? They lost. They lost the election from talking with ignorant people and isolating men. The so-called American descendant of slavery, man, they isolated him, pulled in ignorant women who had been used for 20 years to project the image that is projected through the Jim Crow Museum at Ferris University in Big Rapids, Michigan. Those images of negative stereotypes were seen once again in a modern context when we see these female rappers. The dudes is the dudes, and they do what they do, and it's more variety, so you can't put them in a box. There's females who are positive, but what they call ratchet culture, the rise of ratchet culture, is what got promulgated, what got promoted. So that's what all we saw. So they couldn't win with that, and they losing now. So that's why when Charleston White said, I'm not that ignorant, I'm not a counterpart of the one you promote, and these ignorant individual women that you bring up from the strip pole, from the strip club, from the sex trade worker level. I'm not a sex trade worker. I'm not coming from that side and angle. So you can't talk to me like I'm their counterpart. You have dug deep down into the abyss of negativity to grab the women you want to grab, and you ain't grabbed nobody like they mama. Charleston White said, my mama didn't bring males in and out of my house, and then I ain't see no dudes running in and out of my spot. So when you see these crack dealer dudes, they say, well, maybe I can get a position. Nah, they got to get education. They got to read some books, because to come online and talk some back and forth about what happens in the street, they're confused. They see it happening, but they don't know what's behind that. That's negative propaganda. They ain't using intelligence and intellect. They have to be educated, and even the people they're around. You've been around this one and that one. They successful. Why they even letting you do that? Because you can't even tell them, hey, brother, don't do that, because you might threaten them and say, who you telling what to do? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I used to do? Yeah, you used to kill your own people, so they should be afraid of you, shouldn't they? Charleston White wasn't afraid when he was in them rooms with them gangbangers, and they said something to him, but they knew he was right. Deep down inside, they knew he was right. It wasn't really a play that he did when he say he used the situation, and he spoke to the gangbangers, and he knew that would propel him, but he knew the dynamics of so-called inner city communities. He knew in the inner city, we propel the negative to the heights of where it should be. That's why this is information. This is game for the people. This game meaning all people. See, this game right here can extend not just from some inner city people who listening. Caucasian out in the suburbs can benefit from this. He know who's real. You see, people can see you and know that's a real dude right there. It's just real is real. The truth is truth. There's one truth. So people can hear it. They can benefit from it. Maybe I should look into a trade or a skill. Maybe I should look into a craft that I can perfect and get me a business. That's what this country is about. So the investment, which wasn't in the people in this country, it was in overseas companies and more dividends and profits for corporations. That's business. One can't say that was wrong, but it ended up wrong because in harsh economic times, it makes people not have nothing when we saw an influx of illegal immigrants being welcomed with open arms. That was one of the biggest bad actions we saw in the last 50 years. We thought it was a few dudes who was landscapers hiding. Ain't that what we thought? And now we see in every city, there's thousands of illegal people taking jobs and resources from U.S. citizens. Let's just say they taking it from Caucasians, because we never got nothing no way. Not in that way where we got extra activities. We weren't working in these wealthy people's houses. And the excuse was that so-called black folk didn't want jobs. But it was 2009, 2008, from 7 to 2009, when it was harsh conditions and no jobs around. So people would have taken anything and couldn't get it. You walk into a McDonald's now and nobody speaks English. Come on, man. But the trick is this, as we leave and as we exit this episode, excuse us. The trick was this. That somebody thought, I'm going to hire these illegal workers, or I'm just going to hire these people who will work in McDonald's, and they were a high level Latin people, Spanish speaking people. They flooded the fast food industry. Everybody remember this. Fast food jobs used to be for retired people. You'd see the retirees would be at McDonald's in the morning. People who retired from their jobs, had their pension. They just want to get out the house, have something to do, interact with some people. Hi, may I help you? Welcome to McDonald's. That's what they were doing. It was a bunch of them. That was the stereotype. It wasn't all of them, but it was enough of them where it was respected. They just doing their thing. It's a free country. They working. Having, no big deal. Then you had after school, or you had high school kids would come in after school. They worked the evening shifts at McDonald's. And then you had whatever it may be in between that, a mixture of a bunch of different demographics of people, of categories working there. And that was what it was. And then the thing with McDonald's was, for the USA, you knew they didn't pay enough, but they paid enough for you to get yourself right and say, well, I'm going to go to school. So you worked somewhere real bad, like some low paying job, but you went to get you a trade. I'm going to learn how to do this auto mechanic. I'm going to learn how to do this refrigeration and heating. I'm going to learn how to get me a certificate where I can be a firefighter. I'm going to study for that exam, or what, and the list goes on. But people took that as a supplemental job at these lower entry level positions. And it wasn't no career. There wasn't no intention for career. But then a lot of people started getting, international people got these jobs, so and they would, from other countries, and they would work and lock in, because a lot of international people ain't locking into no job like that. They're going to also use that job and go to school. But then you had a group of people who just worked at that McDonald's. They had 2 fast food jobs, and nothing wrong with being a hard worker, but people started demanding higher wages at a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant. That was never the intention of the wages to be high. You just worked there as a supplement to the other job you had. It may have been someone with 2 jobs. And that's how they worked it. So, but the people hired the international people who they thought would be loyal to the job. And what did them people do? Around 2010, 2008, 9, 10, around that time, international people protested and boycotted fast food restaurants for higher wages. They started fighting for higher wages, and the next thing you knew, a Big Mac meal was $15. So my point is, people didn't have the insight to teach. No, this ain't really a real job, man. I'm going to let the same people who've been working at work. If you want to get in, you get in with the mentality that you take this skill, you take this employment, and you move on to something bigger. You move on to a skilled trade. Them dudes wasn't trying to go to school. They was working here just like they was working on a farm or a plantation somewhere in the Central America. That's how they was looking at it, and that's not the way the states work. So what I'm saying is, a lot of people came to the States with a mindset that didn't apply because they didn't have enough knowledge and foresight. They wasn't going to listen to nobody, but those who owned those companies and those who created policy and legislation could have let that information be known, and they didn't. It just fell through the cracks, and then they ruined the whole fast food industry by thinking you can give somebody $20 an hour that makes sandwiches. Nah, that was a quick hustle. That kept you out the penitentiary. I'm going to work here and not go to jail, because many people did it. And you'd say, man, what is dude doing in there? Because he was in there with a master plan. So he was like, I got a plan. I'm going to work here for a minute. I'm going to get out of the hole, and I'm going to just do this. Because really, it's like being in the hole. It's like being in jail. It's economic, financial jail, but at least I ain't locked up in a cell. That's how they was doing it. So they worked there anyway. But as we said, as people just flooded the country, hid in crevices and cracks, they're being flushed out and flooded out right now because they're draining resources and they're not investing into the country. They just here to get what they can get. And that's the difference. So that's why when Charleston White says he ain't their problem,